Donald Trump's recent political nightmare might be becoming a reality, courtesy of his own party. The Trump administration is still struggling to deal with the aftermath of the scandal known as SignalGate or WhiskeyLeaks, which is when they accidentally sent highly classified military intelligence to an unauthorized reporter. And to make matters worse, a number of elected Republican lawmakers are publicly demanding an investigation into that scandal, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, what you need to understand is that Donald Trump and most MAGA Republican Congress people want this scandal to go away quickly. And yet, we have a couple of prominent Republican lawmakers, publicly demanding an investigation into SignalGate, aka WhiskeyLeaks.
It's also an accurate quote.
What was shared in the Signal group chat goes beyond war plans because they included the timing of the operations.
The Republican head of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, has called for an investigation and further hearings. Quote, "The information as published recently appears to me to be of such a sensitive nature that, based on my knowledge, I would have wanted it classified." Brett?
That's terrible news for Donald Trump. Again, that's the top Republican, the Senate chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. So the guy who has the relevant jurisdiction over something like this. But it's not just Roger Wicker. We'll circle back to him. Actually, earlier today, of all people, you have James Lankford, a Republican senator from Oklahoma, also expressing public interest in an investigation into SignalGate or WhiskeyLeaks, even as he simultaneously tries to downplay its significance.
Here with me now is Senator James Lankford. He is a member of the Intelligence and Homeland Security Committees and the author of a new book, Turnaround, America's Revival. Thank you for being here, sir. I want to get straight to this question of this potential national security breach. The Senate Armed Services Committee Chair, Roger Wicker, he said the incident, quote, raises questions as to the use of unclassified networks to discuss sensitive and classified information. He wants the Pentagon Inspector General to investigate. Do you also want an independent investigation into how all of this happened?
Yeah, it's entirely appropriate for the Inspector General to be able to look at it and be able to two questions. One is, obviously, how did a reporter get into this thread in the conversation? And the second part of the conversation is, when individuals from the administration are not sitting at their desk in a classified setting on a classified computer, how do they communicate to each other? Currently, it's through encrypted apps is how that communication happens. The next question is that the right way to be able to do it? Obviously, that's the way it has been done for quite a while now while they're out on the road. But I do want to remind everybody, this is about the Houthis attacking the Americans. That's the story behind the story here, is that Houthis have attacked American ships 170 some odd times. So that for the Trump administration to push back on them is entirely appropriate thing to be able to do, and they are pushing back.
But very few people are actually contesting whether or not the Trump administration has the right to push back on the Houthis, although I would remind people that, President Biden did during the Biden administration, and Republicans criticized that as well. And so it seems to be, again, one of those situations where the principle changes depending on who happens to be in charge. But even Lankford, one of the most conservative members of the Republican Party, two things. He wants this to go away, right? He wished this wouldn't have happened, but he's principled enough to say, yes, it would be appropriate for there to be an Inspector General investigation, a probe into what happened. And again, this is a big deal when you consider that, again, he sits on the Senate Intelligence and Homeland Security committees. This, again, two relevant committees of authority on this. So let's get back to the Roger Wicker thing, because, again, he's the one, and we're going to actually look at a letter that he drafted and sent to the Trump administration alongside his Democratic ranking member, Jack Reed. But let's hear some clips about Roger Wicker and what he had to say, because keep this in mind. Wicker was the one, besides Trump himself, no Republican was more instrumental in getting Trump Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed, despite Hegseth's obvious lack of qualifications and relevant experience. So Wicker basically went out on a limb to get Hegseth confirmed, and Hegseth has been shitting the proverbial bed time and time again. And actually, Wicker has already publicly criticized Hegseth, but we'll play that in a moment. Here's some additional clips getting into Wicker's state of mind.
Do you believe that the information was classified or should have been classified?
The information
as published recently, appears to me to be of such a sensitive nature that, based on my knowledge, I would have wanted it classified.
Again, you can tell Wicker is very uncomfortable about this, right? He's torn between his principles and political expediency, pissing off Donald Trump, the cult leader of the Republican Party. It's why he's hesitating, it's why he's being very thoughtful. You know, if this had happened under the Biden administration, he would be much more quick in his condemnation and unequivocal in his language. But again, he is calling for an investigation. Here's another clip of Wicker speaking to CNN.
We're going to look into this and see what the facts are, but it's definitely a concern, and you can be sure the committee, House and Senate, will be looking into this. And it appears that mistakes were made, no question. Yeah.
So again, he's hesitant, but he's saying not only is he demanding an investigation by the Defense Department, which each department is supposed to have its own inspector general. Of course, Trump went through and tried to purge as many of them as possible. So there's an acting inspector general. They want the executive branch to do it, but he's saying, as the Senate Armed Services chairman, that he will be conducting a separate probe as well. So here's him talking about that a bit more.
When it's all said and done, I hope we can review the actual what substitutes for a transcript in a typed message, and get down to the actual facts. The story was written. We need to find out if it's completely factual, and then make recommendations. But I expect we'll have the cooperation of the administration also. But Senator Reid.
So he thinks that the Trump administration will cooperate, and they, at least in the first term, they were notoriously unpopular, or rather uncooperative with investigations into them. Of course, they were led by Democrats. But something else I want to point out was, because I mentioned that even though Wicker was instrumental in getting Hegseth confirmed, which again, colossal mistake given Hegseth's total incompetence and lack of experience and qualifications, shortly after Hegseth was confirmed, Hegseth put his foot in his mouth, and Roger Wicker publicly criticized him. Republican senator disturbed by Hegseth's comments about Ukraine. Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi said the defense secretary made a rookie mistake in terms of publicly revealing basically how far the Trump administration was willing to go with respect to putting pressure on Russia to settle things with Ukraine, right? He was like, basically like, Hegseth gave away the bargaining position in advance and gave away a lot of leverage in advance of the negotiations. A rookie mistake, put it mildly. And I will also remind you that polls show that more Republicans want Hegseth to resign than want him to stay. Think about that. Think about that, given the devotion the Republican Party has to Donald Trump, that they're willing to part ways with him and say, listen, the guy you picked is a dumbass. He's incompetent. He needs to resign. More Republicans want Pete Hegseth to resign than want him to stay. And a majority of Americans, according to recent polls, want Hegseth and Waltz to resign as well. So this is not good. So now let's turn to the actual letter that they wrote, dated 4 days ago, March 26th. This is the acting inspector general. This is to the acting inspector general, I should say, of the Trump administration's Department of Defense. On March 11, 2025, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was reportedly included on a group chat on the commercially available communications application called Signal, which included members of the National Security Council. This chat was alleged to have included classified information pertaining to sensitive military actions in Yemen. If true, this reporting raises questions as to the use of unclassified networks to discuss sensitive and classified information, as well as the sharing of such information with those who do not have proper clearance and need to know. Accordingly, we ask that you conduct an inquiry into and provide us with an assessment of the following. 1. The facts and circumstances surrounding the above-referenced Signal chat incident, including an accounting of what was communicated and any remedial policies taken as a result. Number 2, DoD policies and adherence to policies relating to government officers and employees sharing sensitive and classified information on non-government networks and electronic applications. Number 3, an assessment of DoD classification and declassification policies and processes and whether these policies and processes were adhered to. Number 4, how the policies of the White House, Department of Defense, intelligence community, and other departments and agencies represented on the National Security Council on this subject differ, if at all. Number 5, an assessment of whether any individuals transferred classified information, including operational details, from classified systems to unclassified systems, and if so, how. Number 6, any recommendations to address potential issues identified. Please include a classified annex to these reports as needed. The Senate Armed Services Committee will work with you to schedule a briefing immediately upon completion of your review. And it was signed between Republican Roger Wicker, chairman of the committee, and Democrat ranking member Jack Reed. And again, the vast majority of Republican lawmakers don't want to touch this because they are worried that it will reflect poorly on Trump, given that it's politically sensitive at best. And Democrats should, quite frankly, be demanding this relentlessly. The momentum will not maintain itself. Facts do not speak for themselves, and Democrats cannot afford to be exhausted at this time. Keep up the pressure. Keep it up. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.